What up YouTube, this is Frequent and you are watching video 1 of my sound design tutorial series. Today I'm going to be covering a bass that is by far my most requested sound, and that is the classic Sine compression bass. And people have been asking me about this one for years, so I figured it was time to do a little tutorial and explain how it works. Also, I've built a rack that makes this process a lot easier, does it all in one step, which I'm going to show and share with you guys. But before we get into that, I kind of wanted to just show you how to do this from scratch. So we're going to jump into this here. I'm going to make a MIDI note and I'm going to grab a default operator here. Mine is set to -12 semitones by default, so I'm going to grab an F1 note here. If you have the regular default, this will be an F0 for you. So there's just a pure sine wave. Let's make this a little longer actually. Let's do like that long. Perfect. So right off the bat, before we even do anything to this, I'm just going to freeze and flatten it. And you can see we're just working from a pure sine wave here. So the idea behind this concept is you're basically taking a compressor and compressing this so hard, more limiting it than compressing it, to the point that this sine wave is slowly becoming a square wave. But the reason we're not starting with a square wave is we really want to accent the movements that we're going to use additive and subtractive filters, and we want those movements to be accented through the compression. And you can definitely start with a square wave, but you end up with more of like a resonant sort of tone, which isn't bad, but this is just kind of the way I've gone about it. And so we're going to start with a pure sine wave and jump into this. So first thing you want to do is grab a glue compressor, and we're after this soft clip function here, so you always want to make sure you have this turned on when you're doing this technique. And these settings are a little bit arbitrary for what we're doing because we're just slamming this so hard that we're getting the distortion from the soft clipper. So the attack release settings, I just usually leave default, and then we're going to turn up this makeup gain, not even using the threshold. We're going to turn up the makeup gain until we see this soft clip engage, and then we're going to find a point that sounds kind of good to start from, to start adding some filters underneath it. So I'm going to just increase this level. Cool. You can hear we're starting to get a little bit of a different tone out of it. So basically the entire process comes down to two types of filters. The first thing is just a notch filter, and for the first step, we're going to basically just use this notch filter and this compressor, and then we'll get into some of the other things you can start adding to build out the sound. But the initial movement of the bass is going to come from just automating this notch. So nothing too technical here. I'm just going to kind of randomly go through and impose some movement on the sound. I like to keep the resonance all the way down, and then the other thing I like that they added with Live 9.5 or 9.6, I'm not sure which one, they actually allow you to use distortion on your filters, so we can use this OSR here and increase the drive. Be cautious with this. If you have the resonance up, I'll just show you, like if you crank the resonance while you have this drive on, you get that tone. That'll just kind of resonate out, which is interesting, but definitely not what we're trying to do right now. So yeah, I just have the resonance all the way down, drive up, and we're going to automate this filter and see what we can get. So go back to here. Great. So that's the initial part of the sound. So I'm just going to freeze this, flatten it out so we can take a look at our dynamics here, and we can take a look at what the wave is actually doing. So I always get rid of this little doodad at the end that's going to show up. That's an artifact from the compression. And then we can turn this down and start to see how the wave is starting to square off at the top. But we have all these other in-between movements that are happening. And so now we really want to start getting more meat out of the sound. So going back to the glue compressor, just have this on every step. Compress the shit out of it. Soft clipper on, obviously. You can hear that sort of square, wavy tone coming out of it. I'm going to add a fade at the end of this just to get rid of that little click. It's bugging me. So yeah, another notch filter. So let's go ahead. I'm going to keep the filter clean this time and not put the distortion on it. But resonance all the way down. Filter automation. Let's do it. So here we go. Cool. So now we sort of need some more top end, because obviously since we started from a sine wave, there's really no top end to work with initially. So There's two effects that I really like to go to get that sort of bitey top end. The first is just an amp, and we're going to use this really subtly. We just want to give this a little bit of top end, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pull out that top end with the multiband dynamic. So put it on dual mode so that we don't have a mono output, pull down the gyrette, pull down the volume, and then I really just like to toggle through these and check out which sounds best. Usually clean, boost, and lead are my favorites. Rock is sometimes good. I mean, they're all good for different situations, so I'm just going to go through here and see what I like. That one's interesting. I think I like the boost here. So now we have a little bit of that top end going. So I'm going to go ahead and add a multiband dynamics. And the idea here is we're just pushing the top end a ton. So I'm going to bring down this top threshold and increase the ratio a bit by dragging it down. And then I'm going to push this into the compression and then push it out too, so we get... And I usually like to have the auto filter come after this compression so that it's basically notching all the added highs we've made. Cool. So now we definitely need to clean this up a bit more, so I'm going to add another notch filter. Come on. Alright, so we can hear the sound sort of starting to take shape there. I'm going to bounce this out one more time. And this is really the whole process here, is just using a little bit of distortion, multiband dynamics, notching, and then the last thing we're going to do is some additive filtering with an overdrive. If you're familiar with tutorials I've done in the past, or just any of the basses I've made, I used to really go for this plugin by FabFilter called Saturn. And Saturn basically is a multi-band distortion unit, and what you could do is you could add like a band of distortion and then automate it around. The reason I've moved towards overdrive, which is what we're going to use in this case, is because even though Saturn's great and you can get really good sounds out of it and you get a lot of options with the distortion, the band, since the spectrum is non-linear on Saturn, when you and you can see this with anything, like with EQs, like for instance, if we were to map these two EQ bands to a macro, so I'll do that really quick. So we'll do frequency of this and frequency of this to a macro, and then even if we try to offset them so that they move in a band together, so if we move the minimum of this one up, you'll see as we move across the spectrum they actually get closer to each other, so that width can never be consistent, and it's the same in Saturn. Even though it doesn't visualize it, this band is actually changing shape as it moves around, which isn't a huge deal, but I really like the idea of with overdrive you just have complete control over everything that's happening and you can see very specifically what the band is doing. And then also you can tune all these settings pretty well. So it's just a little bit more straightforward, and so I prefer it for that reason. Anyways, moving on. Turn off the overdrive for now, compress it again, see what we get. You can see we have a lot of dynamics in the sound. Just to look at the waveform, you can see we're starting to get like all these weird little artifacts from the compression, which is always interesting. We'll just go ahead and slam it again, so let's see what we get. So first thing we're going to need is more auto filter, so I'm going to notch it again just to really clean out like the muddy parts of it and start really focusing on the vocal qualities of the bass. Cool. So now I'm going to actually add an additive automation with this overdrive. I like to keep it pretty much all the way down and then just automate this frequency to start, and then we'll dial in the rest of these settings in a second. So if we listen here. So yeah, this is pretty much the whole thing. We can go ahead and do this one more time just to show you guys how you can keep pulling the sound out of it and get it more and more refined the more you repeat this process. But we'll flatten it again. We're starting to really slam it. We're starting to get some really interesting waveforms here, but not a pure square wave at all. We're getting all these weird little things going on, but it's more squared off at the top, and you can see like over here it's basically like a pure square wave at points. But if you started from a square wave, you wouldn't get all these interesting little rounded bits here. So yeah, anyways, moving on. That's the reason I like to start from a sine wave. But going back to the compression, slam it. It's a little much. You can hear, especially here, we have just a lot of like muddy low buildup. So I'm going to go in with another notch filter and really just pay attention to that low area when we get over there. But first, let's just try some stuff over here. And then the top end gets a little weird there, so I'm still not happy with that part. But whatever. Let's go ahead and add another overdrive. Gotta get that part. It's bugging me so much. I'm gonna just try. Good enough. Alright, so let's listen. Cool. So yeah, that's the entire process, and you can go through. I haven't done any EQing or any sort of like mixing stuff to this, so you could go through and EQ it out. You could do even more notch filters from here. You could do another multiband dynamic, although I don't think this sound particularly needs it. But really, it's just a balance between those four elements, which is the notch filter, the overdrive, the multiband, and then the notch. And then I usually only use that amp like right off the bat to get that sort of initial high end, but I've also had success putting it in every resample. It just depends on the sound. Every time you go about these, you're gonna have to like work in real time with what you're hearing, and for that reason it can be kind of a bitch to sit there and like redo all these sort of automations over and over and over and keep resampling. So to get around that, I've actually built a rack, and I want to show that to you guys now, and it'll make a lot more sense to show it to you now that you understand how this process works. So I'm going to load up another just pure sine wave. I'm going to turn that one off, grab operator, same length. We'll do just a short one to show you guys, and then we're going to grab an F1, F0 if your operator is default. There's our sine wave for each track. Flatten track. Cool. So we have another sine wave, and here is the rack I have made. I'm just gonna cut that over to, oh man, my mouse is freaking out, over to here. And now we have the instant sine compression rack. So I just kind of want to take a second to show you guys how this works, and you can see how it's basically the exact same process that we just did above, but refined down. So the phase knob is basically moving you through 4 phases of resampling. So that process we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but you can do 4 of those just with this rack. And so basically how this works is when this is all the way to the left, it's going through phase 1. So the first phase is just a notch filter and a compressor basically. Turn it up, phase 2, turn it up, phase 3, turn it up, phase 4. So once you have phase 4 going, all of these different chains are activated at once. And so I want to dive through these really quick before we get into how to use this, just to show you what exactly is going on. So what this phase knob does is it actually fades between these 4 different resamples. So on the 4th one, we have every single, this phase 4 has all of these previous phases within it. So if I open up this one, I can show you everything that's happening within the patch. So phase 1, if we open that up, has an amp, multiband dynamic, auto filter, and glue compressor. And for phase 1, your automation there's only a notch filter that you can automate, so that's here. And then so we start here and just this is active, and then when you move to phase 2, these 2 become active. So this, and this you can all automate. So phase 2, if we minimize that, is over here. If we go into the chain, we got utility, which turns it down, which mimics like every time, if you remember when we'd flatten this out, we'd go through and turn it down to get a better look at the waveform, and then recompress it because you don't want to compress it from it being maximized. So the utility will turn it back down, and then we have an amp, auto filter, overdrive, multiband dynamic, glue compressor. So the only things you need to automate in those are the overdrive and the auto filter. So those are here and here, and so on and so on. So by the 4th one, if you have this cranked all the way up, you can automate everything on here, and it'll basically sound like sine compression based. So the way that you use this is you start with your phase all the way to the left, and then you start with your first notch filter. So I'm just going to do the same thing we did above, where I'm just going to... And you can hear how there's already some high end added just from this initial one. And then we're going to move to phase 2 and start automating. Now we can automate notch 2 and band 2. So we'll start automating these. And then band 2, we'll go over here. Alright, move up to phase 3. And if you ever need to check what phase you're on, you can just open up this chain selector. We can see, alright, we're on phase 3 here. So now we can go here. Notch filter 1. Band 3. Alright, and then the last one, move all the way up, and we go to notch filter 4. So and the last band we'll get here. And then you can go back and tune any of these however you want. You can get infinite sounds out of this. So yeah, I'm not going to sit here and automate these forever. I'd rather have you guys play with that. But you get the idea. From a pure sine wave, we've gone from this to this just by twisting these knobs around. And the longer you spend individually going through these and like actually spending time working the automations together instead of just kind of like randomly doing it, the better of an end result you'll have. You can hear a lot of these like weird high end artifacts, and that when I was working this one up here, you saw like when I heard something I didn't like in the mix of the bass, I would go and like make sure the notch filter went and hit that frequency. And so it's a little easier to just like ignore that and not pay, since you can't see the waveform, you're not paying attention to the movement of it as much. But at the same time, it's way faster, and you can sit there once you have all of these automated out. You can do add lane for each automated envelope and just go through and start doing like crazy shit to all of these and get really ridiculous sounds. So yeah, I would encourage you to experiment with this rack, which will be available for download somewhere in the description. Presumably, we'll link back to my website where you can grab it for free. And the other thing is, I would say absolutely hop on that rack, start doing stuff with it. But I would really encourage you to sit down and like try this resampling technique a few times before you jump into the rack, because it really gives you a good grasp of what exactly the rack is doing and how to get the best sounds out of it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to sub to my channel, all that shit, and I'll catch you in the next video.